Hey, Madeline, how's it going?
It's good. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. How have you been?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, just getting through the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel you there. Well, you had a really great lesson that we watched the other
Thank
day,
you.
and there were a lot of really great things. I'm so excited to point out some of these things because I think you've made a ton of improvements, especially on the things that we were really looking at focusing on. Tell me in general, just like a quick summary, how do you feel like the lesson went? How do you feel you've progressed?
I think it went. I thought it went really well. I could feel myself I watched the video back and I could see myself improving on the things that we've been talking about, and that was really rewarding to see. Um, there are a couple things that I want to talk to you about today that I think I could still improve on, but overall, I was really proud of how the students did. I feel like I'm improving and they're improving. It was really nice to watch.
I agree. It was fantastic. And I'm so happy to hear that you went back and watched the video. Like I feel like
Yeah.
it's one thing when we have a conference meeting about what I saw, but it's definitely super beneficial, especially in your reflections to be able to go back to those videos. So I'm so glad that you did that. I'm going to
Yeah.
start off with some really amazing things that I felt that I observed. So one of the things I saw you do was your audiating warm up. And that was fantastic because the students were fully engaged the entire time. They were fully engaged. They had to pay attention because one minute they had to sing and then the other second they had to do it in their head. And they had no idea when you were going to do it. And I also found it fun. You sped it up a little bit, you made it a little more challenging for them. And then it was also related to a lot of the content that you've been working on as far as building their ear training skills, their audiating skills, and their sight reading skills. So I loved seeing that. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Another thing I noticed was your rapport with the students is really fantastic. You're always greeting the students when they come in, and you're walking around the room as they're doing their bell ringers, asking them about things, trying to get to know them. And especially in classrooms like choir, it's really important to build those relationships with your students so that we can keep building our program. Another thing I noticed that we're going to talk about a lot was the pacing. The pacing of the rehearsal was phenomenal. You have improved so much on your pacing, and we're
Thank
going to talk a
you.
lot about that. And then the other thing I really loved was the reflection that you did at the end. I loved that you went back to all three of the songs and you asked the students to go through and look through the music and ask, okay, what kind of things do we need to improve on? What kind of things did you feel we did good? And then the best part of that was that you asked the students, okay, next rehearsal, what do you think will help you do this better? What strategies can we do together to make this better? So you're really involving the students in the lesson planning for the future. And that is so good for autonomy in the classroom and making them feel valued. So it was absolutely fantastic. So, congratulations. It really was a fantastic lesson. It was
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
So let's go to the pacing a little bit. So the pacing was the SMART goal that we had set for
Right.
this specific lesson. So tell me how you felt about the pacing, what you did, what you felt went a lot better than it had before.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. I feel like the pacing was a lot better than it has been previously. So I think something we talked about last time was rehearsing smaller sections of the music rather than longer sections, and I thought that that went very well. I think I was used to doing those longer sections, like coming out of choir in college and rehearsing with college ensembles. Because the attention span's there, the experience is there, it's just more achievable in those sorts of environments. But I think breaking it up into smaller chunks seemed to be really successful for the high school students. They were more attentive. It was just more easily digestible to them, I think, and more rewarding because we set smaller goals, but then we achieve them, and they seem to be retaining it really well too. And there were definitely fewer disruptions in the classroom. Um, yeah, I think it really helped a lot. That breaking it into smaller chunks like that was really successful.
Yeah, it looked like it worked really well. And the kids, like you said, they were more engaged, they were more on track, they knew where they were going. I noted a couple things. Do you have the observation classroom management rubric pulled up that I sent you?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Awesome. So this is the observation tool that I used specifically for this lesson since we were working on classroom management and kind of in the pacing, making sure that we got the pacing. So anything that you see that's in that pinkish, reddish color is stuff that we can improve on a little bit. So it's not that it wasn't
Okay.
completely uh, observed. It was that there are some things we can do to kind of make it a little bit stronger. Anything that you see that's highlighted in the blue is stuff that wasn't observed. And well, not observed because you didn't need it in your lesson. You didn't have it planned in your
Okay.
lesson. So I'm not
Okay.
using that as like a, oh, you didn't do this. No, it's perfectly fine. So anything you see in blue just reminds me, oh, yeah, she didn't plan that for this lesson. And that's okay. Um, so that's what I have next to it in the evidence. There was no small group activities. If you go down, you see another blue section: volunteers and paraprofessionals work with you. You
Okay.
didn't have any volunteers or paraprofessionals in there, so we didn't need to worry about that. So I'm going to go
Okay.
through a couple of these things. So this first mark on here: effective and efficient procedures have been established. The students always know like where to go. They're really good about knowing where to go. They come in, they put their phones up, they grab their stuff from their folders, they go straight to their seats and they start working on their bell ringers. That was fabulous. When it came to moving to rehearsal time, they knew exactly what your signal was and how to get back to the rehearsal space, and all of that. The only thing that I noted on there was that they moved, but there was some talking. Not a big deal, but that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. Um,
Okay.
like I said, we didn't have any small group stuff, but I did notice some things where small group could have been a little bit helpful, and we'll kind of get into that as well.
Okay.
For monitoring, I thought you did a fantastic job with monitoring, especially because you've got the students in front of you in that rehearsal. A lot of your activities and the way that you're rehearsing now really keeps them engaged. So it's easier for you to look around and kind of see what's going on.
Yeah.
And then again, the classroom is arranged to support the instructional goals of learning. The phone chart, the folder slot, students knowing exactly where to go, where to get materials, how to get to the risers for rehearsal. And not only that, like the students are really good about respecting the way that you have set up your classroom. And they will move a desk back if it got moved. They will fix a riser if it's kind of out of place. They will
Yeah.
fix somebody's binder if they put it in the wrong way or something like that. So I love seeing that your students really take initiative in how your classroom space is organized. And then the last thing that we went through, our last little box here, the lesson has a clear structure with time for students to engage in thoughtful preparation and discussions. Again, a lot of the stuff that we already talked about. So the pacing, the discussion at the end of class. So a lot of really fantastic things.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to go down to this part, which is where I put all of my other notes. So we've talked about the pacing. Pacing was fantastic. The use of the audiating warm up, really fantastic. And then again, the rehearsal reflection was just the perfect way for you to end the rehearsal with those students. So that was fantastic.
Thank
I want to talk about a couple of things that I noticed that I think now that we've got the pacing set. So, the pacing with our classroom management is so important. That's one of the bigger, most important parts of classroom management, in my opinion, because if you get the pacing, then a lot of your classroom management concerns are taken care of. And then you can focus on the other things, smaller things that are kind of making class, small disruptions and things like that. Um, so we have managing student conversations during transitions and sight reading, utilizing warm up exercises as attention grabbers. That was an idea that I had for one of the
Okay.
things that I noticed. And then we're going to talk about, or I would like to talk about, I don't know if this was also in your notes, but individual student behavior, and specifically one student who wasn't participating in one of your activities.
I think I
Um,
know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about, you said that there were less disruptions now that you've really worked on the pacing, but there were still some disruptions. So why don't you tell me a little bit about some of those disruptions that you saw?
Right. So I think now that I've kind of got the pacing, at least I'm progressing with that strategy, then I think a lot of the talking comes just in between. So if I'm doing things in smaller chunks, which is working really well, that also creates more transition times. So I'm just experiencing some talking in between, I guess, sections of rehearsal. So I've tried a couple of different strategies. So I've tried the waiting strategy, and I've tried the like, oh, I'm gonna raise my hand and like be all sassy. But I feel like both of those strategies, while they do end up working, I feel like they waste rehearsal time because I'm sitting there waiting with my hand up or not. I'm sitting there waiting, and then they're going to decide when they want to stop talking and start paying attention. But I feel like especially what you outlined on your observation document, the using warm ups to engage the students, I feel like that would be a better use of our time to transition rather than me
Mm-hmm.
just waiting for them to stop talking. So
Right. One of the things specifically that I wanted to bring up to you is something that I saw another teacher do, which is that they used just having them sing a unison do all together at first. So, like, let's pretend that we just finished this section of canon and we got done with canon. You close your music, you can make it a visual thing that you're taking your music and you're putting it over on the side of your piano so that they're getting that visual of like, okay, I've closed this music and we're out. At the same time, you can go do, and then they all have to match you. And it's
okay,
okay if they're grabbing their music, because that's the other thing, is that they know exactly what they're going to do next. Because another wonderful thing you did, you had a whiteboard, that little whiteboard that had the order of what your rehearsal was going to be. So as soon as you finished canon, they knew that you were moving on to tribute to the armed services. So you've moved canon. They know that you're going on a tribute to the armed services. You go do while they're trying to get out their music. So you can have the bassist sing the do, and you're going to want to hit that tonic for that key. So
okay,
do, and then have your sopranos sing the so, and then have your altos join in on the
okay.
mi. And
I
that
love that.
way, especially if you're doing it in the tonic, it's establishing the key for that song. And if you need to, you can even take that once you see that everyone's gotten their music out, just do a quick little ready and no na na ni to kind of reestablish
Okay,
those vowels that you want. And I think that's going to be another way that can help you transition, but also make the transition useful for what you're going
yeah,
on to. So I think
I
that'll
love
help a
that.
lot.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I hope you try it because I think I've seen people do it and it really really has a huge effect on how smooth the rehearsal runs. And then if you're moving on to a different activity, it seems kind of elementary, but what you could do is use some of the more fun warm-ups. You could say, "All right, we're going to go back." And then you can say, like, go back to our seats. And then you can go, hey, ho, nobody home, and they're all going to join you because I know I saw your
They
kids do
know
it.
it, right?
That's their favorite warm up song, too. They love
Perfect.
it. And so they're going to go and they're going to be singing the song while they get back to their seats. And then you can quietly stop them and then move on to your next activity. So I think that will help a lot. And I'd really love, if you're interested in using those ideas, I'd love to see you try that or incorporate some of that into your rehearsal process
Oh, I
as well.
definitely will. I feel like the students would really, really love that too. So,
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to help them a lot. Let's talk about sight reading. So when we went through
okay.
sight reading, I saw the process. The process, your process, and the way you walk your kids through sight reading is really, really good.
Thank
But
you.
we did have a couple of possible disruptions that I saw. I don't know if you saw the same ones I did. So what kind of things did you see?
Okay, so a couple of things. So first of all, I've noticed. I didn't notice it as much in real time, but when I went back and watched the video, I noticed it a lot more. That when I stop and work with one section, the other ones tend to whisper and chatter a little bit. And it's not so much that it's super distracting, but I would rather it not happen.
Mm-hmm.
I saw in the video I was working with the basses and the sopranos and altos were doing it, but I definitely can recall it happening with other sections at different times in different lessons. So I don't know if you have any suggestions for how to approach that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that makes it really, really easy to keep students from, talking while you're working with another section is still having them do something simultaneously. You always want to have everybody doing something. I think that's actually what I put on there. Everyone is always doing something. And so, what you can do is while you were, so at one point you were working with the altos, they had a tricky harmony that they were getting. So, you wanted to slow it down and work with them and make sure that they could hear it and figure out those intervals that they needed. So, what you can have your basses and your sopranos do is do the hand signs with you at the same time so that they're focusing on that. They're still watching their music, they're still reading their music, but they're not singing or they're not chanting so that you can hear the altos and make sure that the altos are fixing the issue that they have. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. Instead of just doing hand signs, you can have them do hand signs and chant, and that way that'll make sure that like you can hear them and you're not just seeing someone like move their arm through your peripheral
Right.
vision, like you can hear them chant it as well. And
Okay.
you can also have them hum it so that the altos can kind of hear that harmony as well, so they
Right.
kind of know how their harmony is working in with the other parts. Or you can have your sopranos and basses do it on a neutral syllable, so on an ooh or an ah, so that you can still hear, again, you can hear all those harmonies, but then you're listening specifically to the solfege syllables that the altos are singing and making sure that they're getting it correct. So I think that would be super, super helpful.
Yeah, I really like the idea of them hopefully like learning more about audiation as they do this. That's definitely been something that I've been trying to focus on in my lessons, like with the warm up we were talking about earlier. So I think that that could be really helpful, but also
Mm-hmm.
keep them engaged in the sight reading activities. So I really like
Yes,
those ideas.
absolutely. I'm so glad. I hope that it helps, and I think it'll make it a lot easier to kind of manage those students. So that was one thing you said that was a bit of a disruption. Was there another thing that you said was a bit of a disruption?
Yeah, you mentioned that you noticed that one student that wasn't really participating. I've definitely noticed that too, and this is not just something that occurs in this lesson only. So this is actually this is actually a big thing. So this student in particular, she's an alto, and she is very bright, very respectful, very sweet, typically very engaged in the rehearsal portion of the lesson, and if we do a theory lesson, she's typically engaged. But for some reason, she just kind of shuts down every time we do sight reading. Um, and it's not something that disrupts the rest of the classroom. So she's not, having outbursts or doing anything like that. But just like I assume you saw in the video, she just kind of doesn't really participate and just
Mm-hmm.
kind of checks out, I guess, during sight reading. And I'm really not sure how to approach this at all.
So did you say that you have a good relationship with, so you said the student was respectful, very sweet, so I assume
Yeah,
you already have a
they're
really good relationship with that student?
right. I've never had anything, I can't recall any negative interaction with this student. I've even met their parents at open houses and things, and their parents are really nice and really engaged with the student schooling. So, no, we have a great relationship. So I know it's nothing about me personally, you know.
Do they work well with the other students in that section as well?
In just about everything except for sight reading. So when we're
Okay.
doing rehearsals, they're extremely engaged. They learn their part and they learn it well. And they're not too loud of a singer, not too quiet of a singer. They blend nicely with the other voices. It's really just sight reading, and it's really strange. It's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. So that's why I haven't really approached her about it yet because I just don't
Mm,
really know how to yet.
I gotcha. And is this how long has this student been in choir?
That's a good question. I can't I'm pretty sure they're a freshman. I can't remember if they're a sophomore or freshman, but they're a younger student, and I remember reading their file that they were not in choir in middle school,
Okay.
so not very long.
Okay. So here's a couple of things we might want to think about. If it's just sight reading that they're kind of zoning out on, then it seems like it's something specific to sight reading. So they're fine with everything else. They enjoy everything else. They work with students. And then the other thing, this is why I asked if how long they had been in choir. So if they hadn't done choir in middle school, Most of your students have, right? Most, if
Yeah,
not all, of your students have been in choir before, in middle
a good
school
number of
especially.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. So they already know how to sight read and they're already very familiar with that. They're very proficient at reading. I'm wondering if there are two things that it could be. It could be that the student, for some reason, doesn't feel comfortable or confident with sight reading,
Okay.
especially since they're new to choir, and they haven't really done a lot of sight reading before. And
Right.
the other thing that it could be, but since you say that they're really respectful and you generally have a good relationship with them, I don't think it's this. But they could also just not understand what the purpose of sight reading is.
Oh, I never even thought about it that way.
They could
Okay.
it could be that they don't understand the value of it, understand why we do it. But again, I feel like that's not the case, because even with students, if they're not 100% sure why they're doing it, if they really respect the teacher and they enjoy the class, most of the time they're going to do it anyway. So I feel like
Right.
it has to do with whether or not they're competent in their ability to sight read. So there are a couple of things that you can do. So we said that she's shutting down, she's not doing anything, she's not participating, she's not really singing.
And
So
I
I
can see, like, sometimes I can see the wheels turning. But she just doesn't participate. So it's like I can tell she's
mm,
at least trying to understand, the concepts, but just
right.
not actively participating in the activity. You know.
Mm. One thing we could do is try and email her other teachers
Okay.
and ask them, hey, how is she doing in your classes? Does she always seem like she's engaged? Does she seem to struggle with anything? Because it may also confirm, whether or not it's a situational thing that has to do with not understanding the value of it, or if the teachers also recognize, oh, yeah, she shuts down when she doesn't understand something. And then
Okay.
the other thing you can do is, if that is the case in some of the other classrooms, you can ask those teachers, could you give me some tips? What kind of things have you said to this student or tried to do for this student that seemed to help? So you could reach out to the other teachers and see if they have any feedback. And then, of course, probably the most important thing is pull the student aside after class, outside of class, not during class, and definitely not in front of the kids, but
Right.
pull her aside and say, hey, I've noticed this. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on? Like, is everything okay? I wasn't sure. And I would probably start that conversation, actually, instead of going straight into, hey, I noticed this. What's wrong? Maybe start with, like, hey, I saw that you really nailed this section of the song today. Always start with some positive things that they did in class so that they feel a little bit more comfortable. And then maybe ask them a general thing of, like, how did you feel like class went today? What did you really enjoy about today's class? But keep it kind of focused on the class. And then you can kind of maneuver into, oh, sight reading. I feel like I looked over and I couldn't really tell if you were participating in sight reading. Like, is everything okay? And you can open up that conversation with that student. And then if they start to explain what's happening, then your next step is to try and find solutions. And you can find solutions with asking the student, well, how can I help you? If it is what we think it is, if it's that they're not comfortable with it and they don't feel confident, we can say, okay, well, we can do some activities where we do group activities with sight reading, as opposed to I'm always leading everyone. And we'll
Right.
have each group work on their part. And I can ask one of our section leaders to help you and coach you and make sure you're doing okay.
Yeah.
And one of
That's
the
a really
other,
great way to introduce these small group activities too. So
yes,
yeah, I love that.
absolutely. And then they may be, because it's singing, kids are always shy about singing. It's
Right.
very vulnerable. So if she's not participating, it could be that she's afraid she's going to make a mistake. She doesn't want people around to hear her. She doesn't want the other people in the section to turn to her and go, oh my gosh, you're making a mistake. So reassure her that, especially your section leaders and your student leaders that you have, reassure her that those students are really, really supportive and happy to really coach you through some of those things to help. And then you can kind of go through, okay, well, what other things do you think would help? Or is there something that I can help you with? Or can we schedule an after school time or something like that so I can help you? So it seems like that's the way to go, I think, with that student is having that personal interaction with them to kind of see how it goes.
I agree, and I've talked to them about various other things before. Like I said, we have a pretty good relationship, so I feel like if I were to bring this up in the right way, I feel like they would be open up to me
Mhm.
about it. So I yeah, this is really helpful.
I'm so glad. Well, okay,
Yeah.
so let's look at what we need to do next. So, if you look at your evaluation form that I sent you a copy of, under the evaluator summary comments, I kind of put a couple of notes. So, our original SMART goal, all about pacing, got it. It's going really, really well. And keep that up because the more you keep it up, the easier it's going to be, the smoother things are going to be. The next thing I think we should work towards is really focusing on how to limit those student conversations.
Yeah.
And so we're going to, in our next observation, that's kind of going to be what we really look for. What
Okay.
I need both of us to do is we need to complete our co reflection, which you have a copy of, and I've started a couple of notes on my side, and I'll kind of edit them a little bit based on what you do with yours. And then we have our mentee mentor, our personal reflections. And we want to try to get those done by the 12th of this month so that we can have those and put those in our files. And then I want you to start working on your SMART goal for our next observation. So, our next observation is scheduled for the 6th of next month. So I want you to work on writing that SMART goal and figuring out some ways that you can really work towards accomplishing that goal. And then I want you to go into our daily collaborative journal and as always, any questions that you have, any things that you're curious about, we can chat about in that collaborative journal. But definitely, if you can, have that SMART goal by the 30th so that we can kind of look over it
Okay.
and have a meeting and talk about it a little bit as well. Um, this was a really great lesson, and I felt like you really have made so many improvements. And I
Thank
can
you.
see that you're really dedicated to finding where you need to improve and really finding ways that you can do it the best way for your students. So, congratulations. You really are doing like a fantastic job. Keep
Thank
up the
you.
good work. And if you could, so I have the signature stuff down here. I'm going to sign it over on my end, and I'll
Okay.
send you the DocuSign document through email so that you can sign the teacher signature, and then we'll have that all completed and done.
Awesome. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll see you later.
Thank you.